So I'm planning a church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the question that people naturally have is why church? As you talk to unchurched people, or as young people who used to go to church and no longer do, what's the big deal in church? And I wanted to take a few video sessions and just kind of talk about the importance of church and why church matters. And in this first one, I want to really talk about what's wrong in churches. Why are people leaving? Why are young people uninterested in the church? When you talk to people about church and they naturally have a response like, the church is dull or boring, or I don't get the point, or what a waste of time, I think our natural inclination for those of us who love church is to get defensive and to try to say there's something wrong in their life spiritually, and we make excuses for why they're leaving. But I think in some instances we have to be honest about what's wrong in the church. Mark Twain said the true patriot doesn't ignore the problems in his country, but rather is honest about them and addresses them. And I think for those of us who truly love the church, we need to be honest about the fact that there are some issues in the church. In the North American church, there's some things we could do better. There's some things that we're doing wrong. And so this first session, I just want to kind of talk about those things. If there's one thing my generation's good at, it's good at pointing out what's wrong. It's good at finding what's the critical flaws in things. I mean, if you get on the internet, people all over are talking about what's wrong with a movie, or what's wrong with the country, or what's wrong with the church. We're real good at finding out what's wrong. We're not so good at really addressing how to make things better. And that's what we're going to talk about in later videos. But first off, I want to say that if you've left the church, if you've stopped going to church, or you've never gone to church and you see it as something pointless, something petty, and a lot of times the examples you've had of church have been exactly that. And I'm sorry, because that's not the biblical model that Jesus wanted to implement. And that's not what a church should look like. And you're right for being disgusted or disillusioned by those examples of church, because that's not what God intended it for it to be. Many times the church is very political. People are using it just to get power or to get connections to other people. That's not what the church was supposed to be. And sometimes it's a big social club. And that's not what the church was supposed to be. Sometimes it's become so ritualistic and tradition-based. And you just go in, you kind of put yourself on autopilot because you know what's going to happen next. And that's not what the church is supposed to be. Sometimes it's so boring or dull that it just has no excitement, no energy, no life. And that's not what the church is supposed to be. And so if you're disgusted or turned off by these things, that's okay. We should be. Those aren't the biblical example of what church should be. But rather than turning from the church, what I'm going to encourage is that we change the church.